Good morning. What we'll do with our lesson this morning is continue this series that I started. I intentionally wasn't doing this every Sunday, though. It's a series where I'll do one or two lessons on it a month, looking at the apostles, and specifically looking at those apostles that it seems like we don't really have a whole lot of information about. It's a study that I'd never really done before. A few years ago, I thought, it'd be interesting. I wonder if I could get a lesson on each one of these. I wonder if there's enough material. Well, at least with some of them, there is. There may be. I was looking at this a few days ago. It may be that James, I'm going to cheat and look at the chart I put in the bulletin. James, the son of Alphaeus, who I think is also called James the Less. We don't have hardly anything about him. And Thaddeus is another one that there's almost nothing. Simon the Zealot may be another one in there too. So if I do something on them, I may lump two or three of them together. But still, with the information that we are given, I think it's an interesting study, and we'll look at one of these today. If you notice in the bulletin, I titled this "The Apostle with the Wrong Answers," and I intentionally did not list his name there to make you wonder who that might be. This is going to be Philip the Apostle. And one thing that's interesting about Philip is, if not for the Gospel of John, we wouldn't know anything about this Philip. All we would know is his name and that he was one of the 12. One thing that's important to note is this is not the same Philip that's listed in Acts chapter 6 and in Acts chapter 8, one of the seemingly deacons of the church at Jerusalem, and then the one who went and taught in Samaria, and then went and met with the Ethiopian eunuch. That's a different Philip. This Philip, we're first introduced to him in John chapter 1, and most of the verses that we'll look at this morning come from the Gospel of John. We talked a little bit about Philip a few weeks ago when we looked at Nathanael, whom you may remember was Philip's friend, and we saw a little bit about Philip as we looked at Nathanael. What we see in John chapter 1, verse 43, is after Andrew and John, the apostle, were instructed by John the Baptist, that's Jesus, that's Messiah. Based on John's testimony, they both went and followed after Jesus, and Andrew goes and fetches his brother Simon Peter. Then the next account we have here is verse 43 of John chapter 1. The following day, the next day after Andrew and John and Peter are following Jesus, the next day, we're told Jesus wanted to go to Galilee. And he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. So the first point that we'll look at here is that Philip was from Bethsaida. And we're told that that's the city of Andrew and Peter. That would seem to indicate that Philip probably knew Peter and Andrew. In John chapter 21, Philip is one of the apostles that's fishing with Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And he may have been involved in the fishing business. We're not told that explicitly. But he at least is from the same hometown. And we're told here in John 1:44 that Bethsaida is the city of Andrew and Peter. That's why it's notable. There's one other notable characteristic about that city, and it's one that we've mentioned previously, which is from going back to Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11, verse 21, Jesus does not have kind things to say about the city of Bethsaida. Matthew 11, 21, woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. Here Jesus has been teaching in Galilee. Bethsaida is one of the cities in Galilee. Jesus has been working there for a while, teaching, performing miracles, and condemns the area, condemns the city. And using such Old Testament examples as Tyre and Sidon and Sodom and Gomorrah and places such as that, if these cities, as wicked as they were, if they had been witness to the teaching that Jesus had done and the works and the miracles that he had performed, those cities would have repented long ago. Yet here, a city like Bethsaida didn't. Now, what does that tell us, though, about Philip? It tells us that Philip, and also we could include Peter and Andrew in there, even though their hometown had rejected Jesus and was not interested in repenting after seeing his miracles, they're not like the rest of the town, are they? Philip can see, Peter and Andrew can see, and they can spot the truth. The other thing we note here from John 1, 43 and 44 tells us that Jesus found Philip. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, I don't know about you. If you're out somewhere and somebody just walks up to you and says, "Hey, follow me," I might need a little more context. I might need a little more to the story. We're not told anything else here other than Jesus found Philip. He found him. What does it mean when you find something? It usually means you're seeking something, right? Jesus was out looking for interested followers. He was looking for people interested in the truth, people interested in the Messiah. What else? We haven't read verse 45 yet. Look at John 1, verse 45. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Here, Philip tells his friend Nathanael that we found Jesus. Now, wait a minute. Who found whom? We're told that Jesus found Philip, and then Philip tells Nathanael that we found Jesus. Well, the only thing that makes sense there is that Philip knew the scriptures. He's talking about what Moses wrote, what the prophets wrote. He's familiar with the scriptures. He knows about the messianic prophecies, and they're looking for the Messiah. This is seemingly the Messiah, and those seeking the Messiah, they're seeking each other. They find each other. That's what happens when we seek, right? We find. We're told that in Matthew chapter 7, verse 7. Philip knew the scriptures. He was able to recognize who Jesus was. Jesus is looking for followers. Philip is looking for the Messiah. It's also interesting, too, when we had studied about Andrew a few weeks back in the verses preceding here. How was it that Andrew and John followed after Jesus? It was based on John the Baptist's testimony. There's Jesus, you should follow him. Philip isn't told that directly from John the Baptist. It's through his own study, and it's his own perceptions that he can recognize whom Jesus is. That's an important note that we'll come back to as we see a little bit more about Philip. But here, let that be something to his credit. We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. He knows the scriptures, and he can see whatever it was he observed or heard. He can see that this Jesus lines up with the Messiah that we're seeking. Like we looked at previously in the study about Nathanael, what did Philip do once he found the Messiah? He introduced him to his friend, Nathanael. He went and sought out his friend Nathanael. Hey, we found him, and you need to meet him. Philip was satisfied he had found the truth and is excited about that and wants to share that with his friend. And we had talked before about Nathanael was a little skeptical and raises an objection. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And to Philip's credit, he didn't argue with him. Perhaps Philip wasn't equipped to argue with him. I don't know. Come and see. I found enough to satisfy my knowledge of the truth, and I think it's the Messiah. Come and see for yourself. That's really, I think, about all that we can glean from that, is that Philip knew the truth, was satisfied for himself, and is willing to share that with others and not trying to argue semantics. The next passage that gives us a little bit of a glimpse into Philip comes from John chapter 6. John chapter 6 includes the account of Jesus feeding the 5,000. And again, that's a story that is in the other gospel accounts. But John here includes some detail that's not in the other accounts. Turn over to John chapter 6. We see in verse 5, "Then Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, 'Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?' But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little." I ask you, why do you think Jesus asked Philip this question? Because that's what John says. He asked it directly to Philip. He didn't ask the 12. He singled Philip out. Did you ever have teachers do that when you were in school? I've mentioned this before in law school, that some professors like that every class period. I had one professor that the way he would call on people was, use your last name. "Mr. Fix, would you favor us, please?" That's the way he did it. It puts you on the spot. And if you're not prepared, you're going to look like a fool in front of the whole class, right? And here it even tells us that in verse 6, this he said to test him or to prove him. Did he think Philip knew the right answer? Was Jesus looking for information, looking for advice on what to do? No. It says he knew himself what he would do. He wants to see if Philip knows what he's going to do. Because remember, what did we observe from Philip in John chapter 1? In John chapter 1, Philip knows the scriptures. He knows the prophecies. And based on whatever conversation or observation he made of Jesus in John 1:43, when Jesus says, "Follow me," Philip was satisfied. He knew the prophecies. He makes some observation and says, "This is him. I found him." He made that initial connection. Now he's being tested. "Hey, Philip, where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" But he's put on the spot here. He does not have a good answer, does he? What answer does Philip give? Verse 7. Perhaps they're seeking or looking around and all the money that they've got. Maybe you ask Judas Iscariot, who's holding the money bag, right? Or perhaps, how much money do we all have here together? 200 denarii. That is not enough to feed 5,000 people. I don't have a good answer for you, Lord. I don't know what we can do. Well, maybe it's Jesus knew how Philip thought. Philip appears to only look at what's in front of him, right? You've got company coming over. How are we going to feed them? Well, we got X amount of food in the house. That's not enough. The stores are closed. Or we don't have enough money to go and buy for however many people may be coming. Even though Philip believed in Jesus, that's clear from John chapter 1. And here, by the time we get to John chapter 6, what has Philip observed? He's heard Jesus teach. I'm sure he's seen him perform miracles. It never occurred to Philip, though, that Jesus would be able to feed 5,000 people with nothing, or with a little bit, and make it multiply. It never occurred to him, apparently. Did Philip say, well, Lord, you're the Son of God. You can produce. You can produce food out of these stones here, like we read in Matthew chapter 4, right? It doesn't occur to Philip. He says 200 denarii is not enough. I don't know what we're going to do. Then we get to Andrew, who comes up and says, well, hey, there's a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but what are they among so many? Well, that's something. And Jesus can do something with a little bit of something, right? But that's part of why I titled this, The Apostle with the Wrong Answers. He's put on the spot here. He's tested by Jesus. Philip, where shall we buy bread that these may eat? Well, the answer is, we're not going to buy bread. He's the Son of God. It reminds me, as an aside, of a quote from Roddy Piper. Just when you think you know the answers, I change the questions. That Jesus didn't ask him the right question, did he? But it was a test. It was a trick question, wasn't it? We're not going to buy bread. He's the Son of God. He can work miracles, and he can use this as an opportunity to teach the 12, but also as an opportunity to teach 5,000 people at once. Turn over to John chapter 12. We've got another incident here. Again, it kind of seems like a little bit of a throwaway story. It's one that we saw when we studied Andrew. But it gives us another little glimpse into perhaps Philip and his line of thinking. John chapter 12 and verse 20. Now there were certain Greeks among those who came up to worship at the feast. Then they said to Philip, who was from Bethsaida of Galilee, and asked him, saying, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Let's stop there for a minute. Philip is a Greek name. It's not a Jewish name. And there's conjecture that perhaps that may have been why this group of Greeks, or perhaps proselytes, it sounds as if they had been converted because they're coming to worship at the feast, why did they single Philip out? Well, maybe it's because they looked at the 12 and they identified one who looked a little more like them. If he had a Greek name, then perhaps. Regardless, for whatever reason, this group of people approached Philip. And they say to him in verse 21 of John 12, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. One thing that this tells us is that Philip appeared to be an approachable person. Do you ever get that? You know, maybe you're out somewhere. Maybe it's you and your spouse. Maybe people are more likely to come up and talk to you than they are to your spouse. Maybe that depends on how much you smile. Maybe it's how, just in general, how approachable you are. There's something about Philip that seems as if these people felt more comfortable approaching Philip than anyone else. And they come up to him, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. We want to meet Jesus. We want to talk to him. What does Philip do? Again, he's put on the spot. He hasn't studied for this test. He doesn't know what to do. I got a group of people here, and these are not Jews. And the Jews don't seem to have a whole lot of dealings with Gentiles, right? Should I let these people? I'm the gatekeeper here almost. They got to come through any of the disciples to meet Jesus. Should I let these people see him? Or would the master want to meet them? I don't know. And he doesn't know what to do. We see this in verse 22. Philip came and told Andrew. Maybe Andrew's more enlightened. Andrew's smarter. He's better with tough questions. Andrew knew the answer in John chapter 6 with the 5,000, right? He pointed out the lad with the loaves and fish. He comes and tells Andrew, and what did Andrew do? And in turn, Andrew and Philip told Jesus. Philip may not have all the answers, but he can at least put people in touch with the ones who do. Sometimes our lives as Christians may be like that. Sometimes we may be studying with someone that asks questions that we don't know. Maybe we need to sit down with that person and study it together and try to figure out what the truth is. What does God really say about that? Maybe we do that and we still are confused. We still don't know. Maybe at that point we pick up the phone and we call someone else that we know. Hey, brother so-and-so, sister so-and-so. I've got a tough question here. I don't know the answer. Have you ever considered X, Y, and Z? What do you think the right answer is? That's what Philip does here. At least he's approachable. Now, for whatever reason, he didn't immediately know these people want to meet Jesus, so let me introduce you to Jesus. But he knew to at least, he didn't just turn them away. He at least got some help and got the right answer for these people. He's not afraid to ask Andrew for help. The last incident that we see that John includes for us is 2 chapters over in John chapter 14. Turn over to John chapter 14 and we'll pick up in verse 7. This is right after Jesus shares with the apostles that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now by this time, the apostles have been studying under Jesus and following him for approximately 3 years. And Jesus just tells them, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Verse 7, if you had known me, you would have known my Father also. And from now on, you know him and have seen him. Then Philip, verse 8, said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is sufficient for us. Did he understand what Jesus was saying? Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I'm the only way to the Father. And then Jesus says, if you'd known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know him and have seen him. Why? Because they've spent time with Jesus. They've seen Jesus. They know Jesus. Therefore, they know the Father. And Philip interjects, Lord, show us the Father, and it is sufficient for us. How does Jesus respond? Verse 9, Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long, and yet you have not known me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. So how can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father in me? The words that I speak to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does the works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father in me, or else believe me for the sake of the works themselves. Most assuredly I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also. And greater works than these he will do, because I go to my Father. He's telling Philip that the Father and the Son are one. If you've seen Jesus, if you've spent time with Jesus, then you know the Father. You've seen the Father. What does Philip's statement here in verse 8 convey? Well, first, it kind of demonstrates a lack of understanding, doesn't it? For as much as Philip knows, I mean, think back to what we read in John chapter 1. Right? John chapter 1, 43, Philip says, we have found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote. Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. We found the Messiah. He knows who he is. Yet here, 3 years later, he's telling Jesus, show us the Father, and it's sufficient for us. He's missing something. Compare that to Nathanael's observation. Go back to John chapter 1, verse 49. Nathanael answered and said to him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. You notice that? In verse 45, Philip says, we found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nathanael says, you're the Son of God. And here in John chapter 14, Philip is asking Jesus to show us the Father. There's a couple things here. First, it at least shows, to Philip's credit, he's got a desire to see the Father, right? There's a strong desire to know the Father, to see the Father. That's commendable. We should all have such a desire. Yet at the same time, it also indicates a lack of understanding. What do we know from multiple passages in the Old Testament? We can't see the Father physically, right? But he should have understood, having spent time with Jesus, that Jesus being the Messiah, the Son of God, that seeing one is the same as seeing the other. And Philip here, like we see with several of the apostles, until they get into Acts, until Jesus is raised from the dead and shares extra information with them until they're guided by the Holy Spirit. Sometimes they just miss the boat. But John kind of lays that a little more clear on Philip than perhaps we see from some of the others. What can we understand about Philip? Number one, just to recap, he studied the scriptures. He knew the messianic prophecies. He knew what Moses wrote. He knew what the prophets had written. And he was able to recognize the Messiah based on his study. He was an approachable person. People looking to find Jesus spotted Philip and said, this guy can help us meet Jesus. He didn't always have the right answers, but he knew how to ask others for help and how to find the right answers. He learned that when we're following Jesus, we shouldn't rely on our own eyes, but we rely on him, right? It's not through our own physical eyesight. It's not within a man to direct his own steps, but we're relying on the Lord. We put our faith and trust in him to get the right answers. And an inner desire to see the Father. What else do we know from Philip? Based on what we can read in Acts chapter 1, he's there on the day of Pentecost. He witnessed Jesus resurrected. He witnessed Jesus ascend into heaven. He's there in the upper room. He's there in Acts chapter 2 to receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit, to receive the spiritual gifts. And then we lose sight of Philip in the New Testament account. But he was there. He was there in the beginning, and like we would assume with any of the apostles, he was instrumental in the spreading of the gospel, teaching the gospel, and the growth of the church in the first century, wherever that took him. And the characteristics that we can see evident in Philip and in the Gospel of John would have served him in teaching others to be approachable, to help people find the right answers, to help people see the Father. And the same should be true for us. Are we approachable? Do we help others find the right answers? Do we help people who want to see Jesus, to introduce them to him? To help people find the Father, to see him? Philip did. And that's an example for us that we can follow. How about you? Are you a follower of Jesus? Are you a disciple? Have you done what the Lord has commanded us to do in order to be pleasing to Him? That involves hearing the gospel, believing it, repenting of our sins, turning from those in order to follow Him, making the good confession of our faith, being baptized for the remission of our sins, and living faithfully. And if we've fallen away, or if we've failed to do some of those things, there's always an opportunity, as long as we are drawing breath, to make things right and to be reconciled to God. If you have a need this morning, we invite you to make your need known. All together we stand and sing.